Hey guys, Dre here, back at it once again with a brand new video for you, and welcome to another Top Gear episode review. Been a little while since I've done one of these. I've not really been sure whether I should keep this series going on or not, despite Top Gear's suspended nature at the moment more than anything else. Apparently we'll find out this week more on the situation and whether the show's going to continue or not, apparently. So more on that as we get it. But in the meantime, I feel like I can review some classic episodes, some episodes you guys may want to hear my views about as well, now and again. It's up to you guys. If you guys want to see it, I don't mind. I mean, the demand is definitely there. I mean, this series has done fantastic views-wise for me at the moment, over 1,000 views per video, so you guys clearly like it, and which is fantastic. So yeah, why not keep going? In this episode, we're going to be talking about Season 6, Episode 2. And in case you don't know what Season 2, Episode 6 involved, it was essentially the Maserati MC12, as well as the cheap car challenge of £1,500 coupes that weren't Porsches. And this is one that was suggested to me by a friend of the show, Sasha. If you're watching, Sasha, you're welcome. Yeah, the episode starts off with a little focus on Maserati. And for those of us that don't know, Jeremy Clarkson's favourite car brand was Maserati. He talked about it at the start of the episode and how he could say Maserati before he could say mummy, and you know how he loved the older Maseratis. You know, he gushed in his biopic review of the 250F, and it was the old 1957 Formula 1 car that Manuel Fangio won the World Championship in. One of the first great F1 cars of the era, and basically Clarkson was driving it, and it was capable apparently of 170 miles an hour, which, when drivers were wearing practically leather helmets and no real protection, that thought alone is probably just terrifying more than anything else. So for that to be a thing, and Clarkson spinning in it, whoa, crazy car to review, and you know, worth a lot of money as well. So cool that Clarkson was able to get a run in such a rare and exclusive car. But then he also dropped a Maserati bi-turbo under a skip, which was also quite funny. And he made the point of mentioning how newer Maseratis have not been able to recapture the magic of the older ones like that in the 50s, 60s and 70s. And then he reviewed the MC12, basically what he liked to call an Enzo in drag, which is essentially what it was. It was a longer or wider version of the Enzo with the same 6-litre V12 that the Enzo had, which produced about 650 horsepower. And the thing is ugly. Like, it is big, it is long, it is an ugly bastard. It really is. It was based on the GT3 version of the car, which would go on to have some form of racing success. But essentially, it was a road-going version of that, and I really didn't like the look of it. Neither did Clarkson. Clarkson called it an Enzo in drag, said he didn't really know what it wanted to be, and, you know, the conflict that involved in that. But it was also the lap record holder for the Top Gear test track at the time, beating the Ferrari Enzo's 119 dead with a 118.9. I mean, I wasn't that impressed by that, given that the MC12 is essentially based off a race car. I always thought it was going to beat the Enzo, which is essentially a road-going car. So I'm very surprised that the MC12, even if it's softer than its race car variant, was still going to be faster by only by a tenth. So that's the thing. Jack D was the star in a reasonably priced car. Meh, really. Like, I'm okay with Jack D. Like, he's kind of funny. You know, he plays the grumpy comedian gimmick, and he's done that for years. I'm okay with that. Not a massive fan. Nothing against him either, I guess. But yeah, the Maserati review was really good. I really enjoyed that. It was a nice, you know, focus on Maserati and, you know, highlighting the good and the bad about the company over the years. I thought it was quite a balanced review in that regard. So yeah, the final was the cheap car challenge. The main segment of the show was the cheap car challenge. Like I said, £1,500 coupes that weren't Porsches. So Hammond rocks up in a BMW 635, James in an antique Jaguar XJS with a big V12 in it, and Clarkson in a Mitsubishi Starion. They do most of the tests at the Millbrook testing ground for cars, starting up in the 2-mile high-speed ring, and trying to get to 140 miles an hour, and the Starion got to 119, the BMW choked its way to 150, and the Jag actually got to 140, but the car was ruined in terms of oil and water problems, basically, mainly just because of the age of the XJS more than anything else. But the second challenge was they had to ride on the handling track, which is basically the basically cobbled paveway and things like that, and they had to drive over it at 30 miles an hour to get a feel of the ride, which is never going to be a good thing in big sports coupes, which, you know, ride isn't really the most prevalent thing in those kind of cars. So that was a thing. And they also had to drive it at 30 miles an hour with a trough of water on their laps, which just obviously is just hilarious, because you just see them struggling and they're laughing their heads off as water just pours into their crotches, and it looks like they've all wet themselves as well, which is just kind of hilarious. Clarkson particularly made a dog's dinner of it for the reason of he was driving a manual, so he had to, you know, drive with one hand to change gear at one point, which just wasn't promising at all, really. And there was practically no water left in it by the end. It again was just kind of hilarious, really. After that, they had to basically drive, I think, something like 60 miles to Oxford in the QI Club. I didn't know the QI Club was still a thing. But yeah, they had to drive to Oxford about 60 miles. You know, BMW had one minor problem. Jeremy was A-OK. James completely struggled, not only with sense of direction, he didn't even make it to Oxford in the end. He had to go to a Travelodge overnight, apparently, because the Jaguar had 6 breakdowns. Which was just hilarious. Like, normally it's Jeremy that gets the terribly unreliable car. In this time round, it was James. His XJS really was a pile of garbage. But the big challenge was in the second half of the show, and the big challenge was you could take the change from your £1,500 and upgrade your car for a racing event. It's basically, I'm pretty sure James had like 400 quid left over or something like that, and he basically he spent most of it fixing the car's engine problems. Which, you know, actually worked, because the car was totally reliable in the final challenge. But the problem with that was that he ran out of money, so he couldn't paint the car in British Racing Green. It was a really bodgy paint job. You could still see spurts of gold shining through the green. Like, he ran out of money, basically, which I thought was just hilarious more than anything else. Hammond had put a terrible fucking spoiler kit on his BMW, which is just hilarious. The whole thing nearly pretty much came off during the endurance race. The whole thing practically came off. He put a rear ring on it and a really terrible spoiler, which just didn't work at all. And Jeremy basically spent his money ruining his car by sticking a whopping great turbo on it, with giving it an extra 80 horsepower, like something out of Gran Turismo 3. He stuck a rally car's turbo on it to make it faster, because that's what Jeremy Clarkson does. What he didn't realise was the challenge was an endurance race on a farm. It was a field-based endurance race, and he had to race for 4 hours. Which, again, led to some hilarious moments, including, like, everyone crashing into each other. It was basically a demolition derby for Jeremy, James and Hammond, more than anything else. And, like, what happened was Jeremy's car just became ridiculously unreliable. He stuck a whopping great turbo on the car, but didn't do anything about the cooling system that comes with that, so obviously he ruined his car. Jeremy was basically doing a lap or two at a time and then coming in to fix the turbo every time, and it ends in spectacular fashion when Jeremy's car just straight up explodes at the front and the turbo just could take no more. So everybody out of the way, and then the whole thing just blows up in a puff of smoke, which is just hilarious. And that was the end of Jeremy. Yeah, James finished first over the 4-hour line, but Hammond actually racked up the most number of laps because James was dirt slow. So yeah, James actually won the challenge in the end, just by a handful of points. But basically conceded they all knew that the Mitsubishi Starion was the best car there, but Jeremy ruined it. So Jeremy won on the basis of he had to admit that he was a clot and he ruined his car. But overall, this is a really, really great challenge. Like, it is just funny. I've always said it, Series 6 through 12 of Top Gear really was kind of the golden age for the show, and I think the most consistently great part of Top Gear more than anything else, and this challenge is just funny more than anything else. There is a lot of really hilarious one-liners and really hilarious moments, and it's really entertaining, and it has all the great elements of the cheap car challenge that they did for a while, before they kind of got a little bit stale, like the supercar one, which, you know, was spectacular for all the wrong reasons, really. But yeah, I've always said Series 6 through 12 really was the golden era of the show, and this show kind of proved it, and we're seeing this again for the first time in like 6 or 7 years. It still holds up and it's still hilarious. Highly recommend you watch it. I'm giving this show a 9 out of 10. The Maserati review was really good too. The only thing that kind of stopped it, if there was a decent celebrity interview, it would have gotten the full 10. But 9, I think, is more than good enough for an episode of this quality. Highly recommend you find it and check it out. The whole episode is actually on YouTube, so just search for Top Gear Series 6 Episode 2 and you'll find it. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought of this show and of the video as well. And of course, if you have any suggestions for episodes you'd want me to review, let me know in the comments. If this episode gets 50 likes, I'll review another episode tomorrow. Until then, I've been Harrison101. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. Sayonara.